Bryce's hands were shaking as he fumbled for words that wouldn't come. The woman beneath the sheets, some brunette he'd met at a bar 3 hours ago, scrambled to cover herself with the pillowcase Quinn had embroidered herself last Christmas. Quinn stood there, 6 months pregnant, one hand resting on her belly. Her face wasn't twisted in anger. It wasn't broken by tears. It was calm, eerily calm, like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire marriage. "Get out," Quinn said to the woman. Her voice was flat, cold. The brunette didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her clothes and bolted past Quinn, her heels clicking frantically down the hallway. The front door slammed shut. Silence filled the room like poison. Bryce opened his mouth. "Quinn, pack a bag," she interrupted. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in 7 years of marriage, Bryce didn't recognize the woman staring back at him. "Sleep somewhere else tonight. Please, just let me explain." "No." The word landed like a judge's gavel. Final. Absolute. "You'll explain nothing. Not tonight. Not ever." She turned and walked out. Bryce stood frozen in the wreckage of his own making, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. He'd expected fury, screaming, objects thrown at his head. What he got was worse, control. And control, he was about to learn, was far more dangerous than rage. Quinn didn't go to bed that night. She sat in the nursery, the room she'd painted pale blue by herself, while Bryce was working late. The crib she'd assembled alone. The stuffed animals lined up on the shelf, waiting for a baby who deserved better than this. Her hands were steady as she pulled out her phone. This wasn't the first time. She knew that now. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. Lipstick on his collar that wasn't her shade. Receipts from hotels she'd never stayed in. Late nights that smelled like perfume and lies. She'd asked him once 2 months ago, her voice small and breaking. "Are you seeing someone?" He hadn't even looked up from his laptop. "Don't be paranoid, Quinn. I'm running a company. That takes focus." She'd nodded, walked away, let him believe she'd bought it. But Quinn wasn't paranoid. She was paying attention. She started tracking his location through their shared GPS, counted the hours his car sat in parking lots that had nothing to do with business. Found the second phone buried in his gym bag, the one filled with messages to women whose names she didn't recognize. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She waited. And tonight, when he thought she was asleep, when he brought another woman into their bed, into the home they'd built together, Quinn finally had what she needed. Proof wasn't enough anymore. She wanted more than a divorce. She wanted justice. The next morning, Bryce came home expecting a fight. What he got was breakfast on the table and Quinn sitting calmly with a cup of tea, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," he started, his voice tight. Quinn looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "No, we don't." "Quinn, please." "You made your choice last night, Bryce." She set her phone down slowly. "Now I'm making mine." He felt his chest tighten. "What does that mean?" She stood, smoothing her hands over her pregnant belly. "It means you're about to learn what happens when you underestimate someone." She walked past him toward the bedroom, leaving him standing in the kitchen with a dread so heavy it felt like drowning. Bryce had spent his entire career reading people, predicting their moves, staying 3 steps ahead. But as he watched his wife disappear down the hallway, he realized something that made his blood run cold. He had no idea what Quinn was thinking, and that terrified him more than anything. Before we dive into how Quinn turned betrayal into strategy, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You're the reason Mr. William keeps bringing stories like this to life, and I want to connect with my family across the world. 3 days later, Quinn made a phone call that would change everything. Donovan Reed speaking. Bryce's biggest rival. The man who'd been trying to crush him in business for 2 years. The one person who wanted to see Bryce fail more than anyone. Quinn's voice was steady, professional. "Mr. Reed, my name is Quinn Keller. I'm Bryce's wife, and I have a proposition that will benefit us both." There was a pause on the other end. Then, carefully, "I'm listening. Meet me tomorrow. Downtown Cafe on 5th Street, 2 p.m. She paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in. Come alone. And come ready to win. She hung up before he could respond. Quinn sat back in her chair, one hand on her belly, the other holding the phone that contained months of evidence. Texts, photos, locations, lies. Bryce thought she was weak, thought her silence meant surrender. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. And by the time he realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. Quinn walked into the cafe at exactly 2 p.m., her pregnant belly preceding her like a statement. Donovan Reed was already there, sitting in the corner booth, watching her with the sharp eyes of a man who'd built an empire by reading people. He stood as she approached. Mrs. Keller. Just Quinn. She slid into the seat across from him, ignoring the way other patrons glanced at the pregnant woman meeting a strange man in public. Thank you for coming. Donovan leaned back, studying her. I'll admit, when Bryce Keller's wife called asking to meet, my curiosity got the better of me. Quinn placed her phone face down on the table between them. How long have you been trying to break into Bryce's network? His jaw tightened slightly. 2 years. He's locked down every angle, every contract, every investor relationship. A pause. Why? Because I'm about to hand you the keys to everything he's built. Quinn's voice didn't waver. And in return, you're going to help me destroy him. Donovan's expression shifted from curiosity to interest. Why would you want to destroy your own husband? Quinn's hand moved to her belly. Because he's been sleeping with other women for months. Because he brought one into our bed 3 nights ago. Because while I've been carrying his child, he's been building a second life behind my back. Her eyes met Donovan's. And because men like Bryce only learn when they lose everything. Donovan leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? Bryce is careful with business, Quinn said. He doesn't make mistakes. Doesn't leave openings. You know that you've been trying to find one for 2 years. So his weakness isn't business. Quinn's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It's women. He can't help himself. Give him someone beautiful who seems interested, and he'll tell her everything. Trade secrets, financial strategies, things he'd never put in writing. Donovan's eyes narrowed. You want me to plant someone? I want you to plant someone who can get close to him. Someone trained. Someone who can extract information by any means necessary. Quinn pulled out a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. I've been tracking him for 6 months. These are his patterns. Where he goes. Who he talks to. How he operates when he thinks no one's watching. Donovan opened the folder. Bank statements. GPS tracking data. Photos of Bryce entering hotels at odd hours. Text messages to various women. It was a roadmap of infidelity and carelessness. This is thorough, Donovan said quietly. I'm not asking you to do this for free, Quinn continued. Whatever information she gets, you use it. Break into his contracts. Undercut his deals. Take everything he's worked for. I don't want money from you. I want him broken. And what do you get out of this? Quinn's expression hardened. Proof. Documentation. Evidence of fraud, if there is any. Because I'm not just leaving him, Mr. Reed. I'm making sure he never does this to anyone else. Donovan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the folder. Then he nodded. I have someone. Her name is Sienna Cole. Corporate investigator. Very good at what she does. How good? Good enough that men forget they're supposed to be careful. Donovan closed the folder. She'll need 2 weeks to build a profile on him. Then she'll make contact. Make it happen, Quinn said, standing slowly. And Mr. Reed? When this is over, when Bryce is facing the consequences of everything he's done, he can never know I was involved. Not until it's too late for him to do anything about it. Donovan stood as well, extending his hand. You have my word. Quinn shook it once, firm and final. Then she walked out of that cafe, carrying more than just her unborn child. She carried a plan that would dismantle her husband piece by piece. 2 weeks later, Sienna Cole walked into an investor mixer at the Harrington Hotel downtown. She wore a red dress that turned heads and carried herself with the kind of confidence that made men forget their wedding vows. Bryce noticed her immediately. She was standing near the bar, laughing at something another investor said, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. When her eyes met his across the room, she smiled, slow, deliberate, interested. Bryce told himself he'd just introduce himself. Network. Keep it professional. But when Sienna touched his arm and leaned in close to hear him over the music, when she laughed at his jokes and asked about his work with genuine fascination, professional went out the window. "You're impressive," she said, her voice low and warm. "I've been hearing about your company for months. It's rare to meet someone who actually lives up to the reputation." Bryce felt the familiar rush. The validation. The thrill of being wanted by someone who wasn't his pregnant wife at home asking about doctor appointments and nursery colors. "Let me buy you a drink," he said. Sienna's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd ask." Within 3 weeks, they were sleeping together. Within a month, Sienna had access to his laptop, his files, his unguarded late-night confessions about deals and investors and shortcuts he'd taken that weren't exactly legal. She recorded everything. And every Sunday, she met with Donovan Reed and Quinn Keller in a parking garage downtown, handing over flash drives containing audio files, photographs, emails Bryce had carelessly left open. "He's sloppy when he thinks he's safe," Sienna reported during their 4th meeting. "He's moving money into offshore accounts, embezzling from his own company to fund a lifestyle his board doesn't know about." Quinn's jaw tightened as she listened to recordings of her husband promising Sienna things he'd once promised her. Forever. Loyalty. A future. All lies. "Keep going," Quinn said quietly. "I want everything. Every conversation. Every transaction. Every single thing that proves what he really is." Sienna nodded. "He trusts me now. He'll tell me anything." As Quinn walked back to her car that night, 7 months pregnant and carrying evidence that would ruin the father of her child, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Control. Bryce thought he was untouchable, thought his charm and his money could cover any mistake. He had no idea his whole world was being documented, cataloged, and prepared for destruction. And the woman orchestrating it all was the one he'd underestimated most, his wife. 6 months into the affair, Bryce's world started cracking. It began small. An investor who'd been locked in for months suddenly pulled out, citing strategic differences. A contract Bryce had spent weeks negotiating went to a competitor at the last minute, Donovan Reed's company, specifically. Bryce told himself it was bad luck. Market fluctuations. Timing. But then it kept happening. A major client terminated their partnership without explanation. Another investor backed out of a deal that should have been guaranteed. Projects that were supposed to launch got delayed, then canceled entirely. His CFO knocked on his office door one Tuesday afternoon, looking grim. "We need to talk about the numbers." Bryce barely looked up from his computer. "What about them?" "We're bleeding cash. 3 major contracts fell through this month alone. Our projections are down 40% from last quarter." "That's impossible." "It's happening." His CFO dropped a folder on the desk. "And I can't figure out why. It's like someone's sabotaging us from the inside." Bryce's stomach twisted, but he forced a smile. "We've had rough patches before. We'll recover." But they didn't recover. Things got worse. By month 7, Bryce was coming home exhausted, his shoulders tight with stress he couldn't shake. His phone rang constantly, angry board members, worried investors, employees asking if their jobs were safe. And through it all, Quinn was there. She'd greet him at the door, 8 months pregnant now, moving slower but still present. She'd take his briefcase, guide him to the couch, bring him tea he didn't ask for. "Rough day?" she'd ask softly. Bryce would nod, running his hands through his hair. "Everything's falling apart. I don't understand it. We were solid 6 months ago, and now," his voice cracked. "Now it feels like the whole company's collapsing." Quinn sat beside him, her hand finding his. "You've built this from nothing before. You'll do it again." "What if I can't?" "You will." She squeezed his hand gently. "We'll get through this. Together." Bryce leaned into her, his head resting against her shoulder, taking comfort in the only stable thing left in his life. He had no idea she was the one burning it all down. Every night after Bryce fell asleep, Quinn would slip into the guest room and open her laptop. Sienna's latest reports would be waiting. New recordings, new documents, new proof of Bryce's lies. In one audio file, Bryce laughed with Sienna about hiding money from a board. "They'll never find it," he said, his voice smug. "I've got accounts they don't even know exist." In another, he talked about using company funds for personal expenses. "It's my company. I built it. I'm entitled to enjoy the profits." Quinn listened to every second, her jaw tight, her hand protectively over her belly. Sienna had also uncovered something bigger: wire transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies registered under fake names, money laundering that crossed into criminal territory. Bryce wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was stealing from everyone who trusted him. Quinn forwarded everything to her attorney, to Donovan, to the forensic accountant she'd hired months ago. The case against Bryce was building brick by brick, and he was too distracted by his crumbling empire to notice. One evening, Bryce came home later than usual, his tie loosened, his face pale. Quinn was in the kitchen, stirring soup she'd made for dinner. "I got a call from the board today," he said quietly. Quinn turned, her expression carefully neutral. "What did they say?" "They want an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. He sank into a chair, his hands trembling slightly. "They're asking about financial discrepancies. Unauthorized transactions." Quinn's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "What kind of discrepancies?" "I don't know. They wouldn't say." He looked up at her, fear written across his face. "Quinn, what if they fire me? What if I lose everything?" She crossed the room and knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it. You're not alone in this." Bryce pulled her close, burying his face against her shoulder. "I don't deserve you." Quinn closed her eyes, her hand moving over his back in slow, soothing circles. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. It was the last lie she'd ever tell him. That night, while Bryce tossed and turned beside her, Quinn stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on her belly where their sun kicked and shifted. Tomorrow, Bryce would walk into that boardroom expecting answers. What he'd get was annihilation. Quinn had spent months preparing for this moment. Every document organized, every piece of evidence ready, every person who needed to know already informed. Sienna had delivered the final files yesterday. Recordings of Bryce admitting to fraud, screenshots of illegal transactions, proof of embezzlement that even the best lawyer couldn't spin. Quinn's attorney had filed the divorce petition this afternoon. The board had received their full report this evening. By tomorrow noon, the district attorney's office would have copies of everything. Bryce's accounts would be frozen by end of business day. His career would be over, his reputation destroyed. And he'd walk into that meeting with no idea it was coming. Quinn turned her head, looking at the man sleeping beside her, the man she'd once loved with everything she had. The man who'd thrown it all away for thrills and lies and women whose names he probably didn't remember. She felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a cold, heavy certainty that this was necessary. Her son deserved better than a father who built his life on deception. And Quinn deserved better than a husband who treated her silence like permission. Tomorrow, Bryce would learn what happened when you mistook patience for weakness. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin, and Quinn would be the one holding the match. Bryce walked into the conference room at 8:58 a.m. expecting damage control. What he found was an execution. Quinn sat at the head of the table, his seat 8 months pregnant, wearing a navy dress that somehow made her look more powerful than vulnerable. Her face was unreadable, her hands folded calmly over a stack of documents he couldn't see yet. Flanking her were faces that made his blood run cold. Richard Hayes, his CFO. 3 board members whose expressions ranged from disgust to barely controlled fury. Linda Chun, an attorney he'd never seen before. A woman holding a recording device. And worst of all, the company's ethics investigator. But it was the figure in the corner that made Bryce's knees nearly buckle. Sienna. She stood against the wall, arms crossed, her eyes meeting his with something that looked almost like pity. No warmth, no familiarity, just professional distance. Sit down, Bryce, Quinn said. Her voice was steady, controlled, nothing like the soft woman who'd held him last night while he cried about losing everything. What the hell is this? His voice cracked despite his attempt at authority. Quinn slid a folder across the table. This is accountability. Bryce's hands shook as he opened it. The first page was a bank statement. His private account. The one Quinn wasn't supposed to know about. Yellow highlighter marked wire transfers. 50,000, 75,000, 120,000. All from company accounts. All unauthorized. There's an explanation. Don't. Quinn's single word cut like a blade. I've heard enough of your explanations to last a lifetime. She nodded to Richard, who pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Photos appeared. Bryce and Sienna at restaurants. Entering hotels. His hand on her lower back. Kissing in an elevator. Every image time-stamped, dated, cross-referenced with business expenses he'd claimed. You used corporate funds to finance an affair, Richard said, his voice thick with disgust. While we were fighting to secure investor confidence, you were stealing from your own company. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Quinn's voice remained eerily calm. She stood slowly, one hand supporting her pregnant belly. You spent $83,000 of company money on hotel rooms, jewelry, and dinners with your mistress. You created false expense reports. You lied to the board, to your investors, and to me. The sight of her, carrying his child while presenting evidence of his betrayal, made Bryce feel smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. But the affair isn't even the worst part, Quinn continued. She clicked to the next slide. Offshore accounts. Wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Hidden LLCs registered under his mother's name. Shell companies funneling money into places the IRS would never think to look. Bryce's blood turned to ice. You were preparing to divorce me and hide our assets, Quinn said, her voice finally cracking. You planned to leave me with nothing while you disappeared our shared wealth into accounts I'd never find. Quinn, please. I carried your child alone for 8 months. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, refusing to break. I defended you to people who questioned your integrity. I held you last night while you cried about losing everything. And the whole time, you were planning to rob me blind. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. This isn't just betrayal, Bryce. It's fraud. It's embezzlement. It's criminal. The ethics investigator spoke up, her voice clinical. Mr. Keller, we've forwarded all evidence to the district attorney's office. You're under investigation for corporate theft, wire fraud, and money laundering. The room tilted. Bryce gripped the table to keep from collapsing. You didn't just cheat on me, Quinn said softly, standing directly in front of him now. You gambled with everything we built. Every employee who depends on this company. Every investor who trusted you. Our unborn child's future. She turned to face the board. And Sienna? She wasn't your mistress. She was a corporate investigator I hired 8 weeks ago when financial irregularities first appeared. Bryce's head snapped toward Sienna, his face draining of color. What? Sienna's expression didn't change. Every conversation we had was recorded. Every document you showed me was copied. Every secret you told me while you thought you were safe? Documented. Quinn pulled a flash drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. 18 recordings. For months of documentation. Proof of fraud, tax evasion, and intent to hide marital assets during divorce proceedings. Bryce reached for her desperately. You set me up. No. Quinn's voice was steel. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure there was proof. She walked toward the door, then paused. From her purse, she pulled out her wedding ring and set it on the table in front of him. The diamond caught the light, glittering like an accusation. As of today, I'm filing for divorce. You will not contact me. You will not contact my family. And unless you prove you've changed, truly changed, you will not know this child. Bryce stood, his voice breaking. Quinn, wait. She stepped back, her eyes meeting his for the last time as his wife. Actions have consequences, Bryce. You taught me that. Her hand moved to the doorframe. I loved you with everything I had. But love without respect is just poison. And I'm done drinking it. She walked out. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Bryce stood in the wreckage, surrounded by people who'd once respected him, now staring with contempt. Your position is terminated effective immediately, Richard said. Security will escort you out. Bryce's empire, built on ambition, lies, and arrogance, crumbled in the boardroom where his pregnant wife had just taught him the cruelest lesson of his life. The people you underestimate are the ones who destroy you. Bryce walked out of that building with security flanking him like a criminal. His key card was deactivated. His office cleared. His nameplate already removed from the door. He sat in his car in the parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and pulled out his phone. 17 missed calls. 43 text messages. All from people who'd seen the news already spreading through their industry like wildfire. He tried calling Quinn. Straight to voicemail. He tried her mother. Blocked. Her sister. Blocked. Everyone who'd ever mattered in his life had already chosen sides. And none of them chose him. Bryce drove home in a daze, his mind replaying every moment. Quinn's calm voice. Sienna's cold professionalism. The evidence stacked so high he couldn't see over it. When he walked into the penthouse, the home he'd bought to prove he'd made it, he found it exactly as he'd left it that morning, except for two things on the dining room table. Quinn's wedding ring, glittering in the afternoon light, and divorce papers with a sticky note in her handwriting. You mistook my silence for weakness. Bryce sank to his knees, the papers clutched in his hands, and finally understood what he'd lost. Not just his company, not just his reputation. He'd lost the one person who'd loved him when he had nothing. The one person who'd believed in him when no one else did. And he'd traded her for lies, ego, and women who disappeared the moment his money did. The penthouse felt enormous and suffocating all at once. And Bryce Keller, for the first time in his life, had absolutely nothing left. If you're still watching and feeling that satisfaction right now, tap that like button. Quinn earned this moment. Show this story some love and comment, "Silence isn't weakness" if you're rooting for her. And subscribe to Mr. William Chronicles. Trust me, it gets even better. 3 months later, Quinn gave birth to a son. Bryce wasn't there. He was 40 miles away in a one-bedroom apartment with water-stained ceilings and a mattress on the floor, staring at his phone when it buzzed at 2:17 a.m. Quinn's sister. Not a call, just a text. She's in labor. Mercy, General. You're not allowed in. I'm only telling you because she said you deserve to know your son is coming. Bryce's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. He threw on clothes, wrinkled jeans, a faded shirt that used to cost $300, and drove through empty streets with rain hammering his windshield. His mind raced faster than his car. His son, his child, being born without him. He arrived at Mercy General drenched, desperate, and was stopped at the maternity ward entrance by a security guard who looked at him like he was a threat. "I'm her husband," Bryce pleaded, water dripping from his hair. The guard checked a list on his tablet. "Your name's flagged. You're not permitted on this floor." "That's my son being born in there." "Sir, I need you to leave or I'll call the police." Bryce stumbled back outside into the rain. He stood in the parking lot, soaked through, staring up at the glowing windows on the 3rd floor where his child was entering the world without him. Hours crawled by. The rain didn't stop. Neither did his tears. At 6:47 a.m., Quinn's sister finally emerged, holding a bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Bryce rushed forward, his voice breaking. Is Quinn?" "They're both fine." Her voice was softer than he expected. "You have a son." His knees nearly gave out. "Can I see him? Please. Just for a minute." She shook her head gently. "Not today, Bryce. Quinn needs space. Please." "But she wanted you to have this." She handed him a photograph. Bryce's hands trembled as he looked down. A newborn baby. Tiny fingers curled into fists. Delicate eyelashes. Quinn's nose. His eyes. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. He turned the photo over. Quinn's handwriting filled the back. "His name is Theo. Children deserve safety, not chaos. Prove you can give him that. Bryce sank onto the curb, clutching that photograph like it was the only thing keeping him alive. His son, Theo, born into a world where his father wasn't allowed to hold him, wasn't on his birth certificate, wasn't wanted. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed, the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it feels like drowning. The months that followed were the hardest of Bryce's life. His penthouse was seized as part of the asset freeze. His luxury car repossessed. His designer suits donated to charity. Everything that had defined Bryce Keller vanished like it never existed. He moved into that run-down apartment with nothing but 2 suitcases and a box of belongings nobody wanted. The jobs came slowly. Warehouse work, loading trucks at 4 a.m. Delivery routes that left his back aching and his hands blistered. Night shift stocking shelves while the world slept. Work that men like him, men who'd once commanded boardrooms, never imagined doing. But Bryce did it without complaint. He attended court-mandated therapy twice a week, sat in circles with other men confronting their failures, learned to say, "I was wrong," without following it with excuses. He paid restitution. Every dollar he could spare went toward repaying what he'd stolen from the company, from investors, from people who trusted him. He volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends, serving meals to people who'd lost everything just like he had. Some of them recognized him, the tech mogul who'd fallen from grace. But they didn't mock him. They just nodded, understanding what rock bottom looked like. Bryce lived like a ghost, quiet, humble, desperate to become someone worthy of fatherhood. But every step forward felt like walking through fire. Meanwhile, Quinn flourished. She opened a small art gallery downtown, bright, elegant, filled with local artists' work. It became the kind of place where people lingered, where beauty lived and second chances were celebrated. Photos of her circulated online. Quinn holding baby Theo at gallery openings. Quinn laughing with customers. Quinn glowing with the kind of peace that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. She became a symbol. The woman who rebuilt her life after betrayal. The mother who chose strength over bitterness. Bryce saw those photos every night on social media accounts that hadn't blocked him yet. He wasn't jealous. He was in awe. She'd survived him, thrived without him. And God, she deserved it. 1 year after the divorce, Bryce came home from his warehouse shift to find someone standing outside his apartment door. Quinn. He froze, keys dangling from his hand, afraid to breathe in case this was a dream. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, framing her face in soft waves. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. And on her hip, balanced with the practiced ease of motherhood, was Theo. A toddler now. Bright blue eyes, Bryce's eyes. Chubby hands gripping a stuffed elephant. "You look tired," Quinn said quietly. Bryce laughed, bitter and broken. "I am." She studied his apartment building. The chipped paint. The flickering hallway light. The life he'd fallen into. "You've been working," she observed. "I'm trying." His voice was barely a whisper. Quinn shifted Theo on her hip. The little boy babbled, reaching toward Bryce with curious fingers. Bryce's breath caught. His son. Right there. Close enough to touch. "Can I?" His voice cracked. "Can I hold him?" Quinn's expression softened, but remained firm. "Not yet." The words landed like stones in his chest. "But you can talk to him," she added gently. Bryce sank to his knees on the dirty hallway floor. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at his son, really looked at him, for the first time. "Hi, buddy," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm your dad." Theo stared at him with those impossibly blue eyes. Then he smiled, wide, toothy, innocent, and laughed. The sound cracked something inside both adults. Quinn blinked back tears, her jaw tightening with emotion she refused to release. "You're not forgiven," she said softly. "Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you for what you did." Bryce nodded, unable to speak. "But you're trying," Quinn continued. "And that matters." She crouched down beside him, Theo between them like a bridge across broken ground. "Redemption isn't about erasing the past, Bryce. It's about becoming someone new, someone better, someone this little boy can be proud of." I want that, Bryce said desperately. More than anything. Quinn studied his face, the exhaustion, the regret, the genuine transformation she'd watched from a distance over the past year. Then keep going, she said. Keep working. Keep healing. Keep proving you've changed. Not for me. Not for us. For him. She stood, adjusting Theo on her hip. I'll bring him by again next month. Same time. You can talk to him. Read him a story. Maybe eventually more. But you have to earn it, Bryce. Every single moment. He nodded through tears. I will. I promise. Quinn paused at the stairwell, looking back one last time. The tragedy isn't that you fell. It's that you had to lose everything to understand what it was worth. Some people never get the chance to rebuild. Don't waste yours. Then she walked down the stairs, Theo waving over her shoulder with his tiny hand. Bryce stayed on his knees long after they were gone, that wave replaying in his mind like a lifeline. For the first time in a year, he felt something other than shame. He felt hope. 5 years later, Quinn sat on a park bench under the shade of an oak tree, her hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, warm and gentle. Beside her, her husband, Marcus, a gentle architect she'd met at her gallery 3 years ago, kissed her temple, his hand covering hers. You okay? He asked softly. Quinn smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. I'm perfect. Across the playground, Bryce pushed 6-year-old Theo on the swings. The boy shrieked with laughter, his small hands gripping the chains as he flew higher. Higher, Dad. Higher. Bryce laughed, a sound Quinn hadn't heard in years, and pushed harder. Theo's joy was infectious, his laughter cutting through the afternoon air like music. Quinn watched them, her heart doing something complicated. Not longing, not regret, just acknowledgement of how far they'd all come. The supervised visits had lasted 2 years. Every month, then every 2 weeks, Bryce would show up at the community center with books to read and stories to tell. He'd sit across from Theo with a social worker watching, building trust one careful moment at a time. He never missed a visit. Not once. Slowly, the supervision faded. Quinn allowed weekend afternoons. Then, occasional overnights when Theo turned 4. Then regular custody arrangements that looked almost normal. Bryce had earned it. Every painful inch of it. He'd finished paying his restitution last year. Completed his probation. Built a modest but honest life working as a logistics coordinator. Nothing glamorous, but stable. Real. He'd stopped chasing wealth and started chasing worthiness. And somewhere along the way, he'd become the father Theo deserved. Daddy, watch this. Theo jumped off the swing mid-flight, landing in the mulch with a triumphant grin. Bryce's heart nearly stopped. Buddy, be careful. But Theo was already running toward the slide, fearless and perfect. Bryce glanced across the playground. His eyes found Quinn on the bench, her hand on her growing belly, another man's arm around her shoulders. Their eyes met. Quinn nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. You've earned this. You're doing well. Keep going. Bryce nodded back, his throat tight. He'd never get her back. He knew that. She'd rebuilt her life without him, found love with someone who treated her the way she deserved from the beginning. Marcus was everything Bryce should have been, present, faithful, steady. And Quinn was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. That used to destroy him. Now it gave him peace. She deserved that happiness. And their son deserved to see what healthy love looked like. Theo ran back to Bryce, tugging on his hand. Can we get ice cream? Please. Bryce crouched down to his level. What do you say we ask your mom first? They walked across the playground together, Theo's small hand in his. When they reached the bench, Theo threw himself at Quinn with the unfiltered affection only children possess. Mom, can we get ice cream? Quinn laughed, smoothing his hair. Did you ask nicely? Please, please, please. Marcus chuckled. Hard to say no to that. Quinn looked at Bryce. It was the first time they'd been this close in months. What do you think? I'm good with whatever you decide, Bryce said quietly. There was a time when that deference would have been manipulation. Now it was respect. Quinn could see the difference. "Okay," she said to Theo. "But only if you promise to eat your vegetables at dinner." "I promise." Theo bounced excitedly. Bryce smiled. "I'll have him back by 6. "Take your time," Quinn said. Then, softer, "just for him. He's been talking about today, all week. He loves spending time with you." Something in Bryce's chest cracked open. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Quinn's expression softened. "You earned it." Theo grabbed Bryce's hand, already pulling him toward the parking lot. "Come on, Dad." Before they run out of chocolate, Bryce let himself be pulled away, glancing back once. Quinn was leaning against Marcus, his hand on her belly, both of them watching Theo with the easy intimacy of people who'd built something real together. It should have hurt. Maybe once it would have. But now, all Bryce felt was gratitude. Gratitude that Theo had a mother strong enough to demand better. Gratitude that he'd been given a second chance when he didn't deserve one. Gratitude that his son would grow up seeing what love should look like, not from Bryce's failures, but from Quinn's courage. That evening, Bryce dropped Theo off at Quinn's house, a cozy 2-story with a garden out front and toys scattered across the porch. Theo hugged him tight. "Bye, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, buddy." Bryce's voice cracked. "See you next weekend? Can we go to the aquarium?" "Absolutely." Theo ran inside, already shouting about the ice cream to Marcus. Quinn stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, watching Bryce with an expression he couldn't quite read. "He had a good time," she said. "So did I." A pause. Then Quinn said something she'd never said before. "You're a good father, Bryce." The words hit him like absolution, like forgiveness he'd stopped believing he'd ever receive. "I'm trying to be," he whispered. "I know." She smiled, small, genuine. "That's why it matters." She started to turn inside, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't give up. Theo needs you, and you've become someone he can be proud of." Bryce nodded, not trusting his voice. Quinn closed the door gently, leaving him standing on the porch as the evening settled in. He walked back to his car, a used sedan that ran well enough, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment. He'd lost everything once. His empire, his reputation, his marriage, the woman he loved. But he'd gained something harder to earn and more valuable than anything he'd ever built. He'd gained his son's trust, his respect, his love. And he'd learned the hardest lesson of his life. Some mistakes don't end in happily ever after. They end in becoming worthy of the second chances you're given, even when you know you'll never get everything back. Bryce started the car and drove home to his small apartment, where a photo of Theo sat on the nightstand beside his bed. Some things are worth losing everything to find, and some lessons can only be learned at rock bottom. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and your favorite moment in the story. And subscribe to Mr. William Chronicles so you never miss stories like this. We tell stories about people who turned their pain into power. And trust me, there are more coming. See you in the next one.